doing purposeful work in the world may not always pay off immediately, and it may not even pay off in our lifetime. But make your mark, ladies and gentlemen. Do what you can to have impact positively in the world. You will be shocked to find that years long after you have left this place called Earth, that some of the things you may have said or recorded, a podcast, a poem you wrote, a documentary film that you made, or a TV show that you executive produced and directed, as Brandon is doing, may be something someone years from now sees and it saves their life, uplifts them, causes them to go after their dreams and their goals. That's what this whole thing is about. Good day and welcome to Robert Young's Bright Fame Shining. And I'm very, very excited today because this is a project, this concept of a podcast is a project that a few people have mentioned to me time and time again that I should do. But one particular person has been instrumental in this process. And I'm very proud to have him with me today because I think he has our stories and the way they are intertwined in this thing called the creative industries are quite unique. I consider this gentleman a very, very dear friend. Normally at this time, you would hear a podcast host to break down, well, he's done this and he's done that and he's done, and we'll get into all of that because it is quite true that to me, this gentleman is one of the most accomplished and most, I would say, sound filmmakers that I have known. Passionate for sure. But technically, I'd be hard-pressed to put anyone in the U.S. up against this guy when it comes to what it takes to actually produce a visual product, audio product, any type of content that could be recorded. This gentleman is the master. His name is Brandon Dumlao. And my brother, it's good to have you here today on the Bright Fame Shining podcast.
Good to be here. I think I'm going to clip that and put that on my LinkedIn and IMDb and all that stuff.
As you should right away. This is an almost unfair episode because we've known each other for so long, and we've had multiple conversations over the years on these subjects over and over again, just staying on track with one another. So to be here in this moment is pretty cool, and to have an opportunity to share what gems might come from this chat with the public is great. Just want to express a quick understanding of the idea here. With Bright Fame Shining, my goal is to have two subjects throughout the podcast, throughout the episodes. One of the subjects that would be featured is the work. I will sometimes be sitting here alone doing a case study, talking about a particular project and all the ups and downs and what it took to get the project done. And in other cases, I will be sitting with great people like Brandon, who are people I've had the pleasure through the work to meet and do great projects with, but also in this case, build incredible friendships. You know, the balance here is that we are going to be talking about career and creative industries and all these things, but really where wellness is the driving force, that is the significant driver and why we're doing this. I want to very much showcase friendships. I want to showcase how people have overcome difficulties and how they continue to fight to be able to produce work that impacts the world in a positive way. So let's just get straight into it. So we're sitting here with Brandon. This part of the podcast is what we will call There is a Story to Be Told. So we will sit here and we will begin with talking about how we came to know each other. And of course, as time passes, your memory serves you differently. It doesn't always tell you the exact truth. It'll tell you the truth that you feel attached to. And if someone's brought joy into your life, you're generally going to have a great, joyful memory of how you came to pass. So this will be an awesome story. So I will love to begin to open the floor for you, Brandon, and my take of how we met. And then I'll be all ears to hear your thoughts on it. So back in the days, when I had first come to the U.S. After leaving Canada to go after a career here in the creative industries, it began with film, and it began with non-linear editing on a system called Avid media composer. At the time, the systems were ABVB. For those who are in film production and they were around long enough, they will remember what that is. For the rest of you youngsters out there, you have no clue, but that's okay.
No,
That's
none.
okay. So at that period of time, I had come into the US working as a non-linear film editor, particularly in music video, and I was having a blast. The opportunity to organize ideas, basically at that time, it was overkill. Music videos shot excessive amounts of footage for a very short outcome as far as the final sequence. Sometimes, many cases, it was not shocking to have 4 or 5 hours of footage for a 3-minute music video. And in order to put that in context so that you could work with it, all of that media had to be ingested. What I had discovered at my time in LA when I first came to the States in '99, I had the opportunity to work with a post facility who had spent some time with their assistants. They put a few assistants aside daily, and their only job, I don't know if I ever told you this, Brandon, but their only job was to dig into the Avid Media software and see how to challenge it. How far could you push the limits of the software beyond what the manual said? And it was very interesting. I was very lucky in my first year arriving in the States. I'd come across this particular facility. I'm so sorry if I'd remembered their names. I would say it out loud. But it was along Wilshire, as far as I remember. I was living in the Mid Wilshire district and would be able to walk there to do projects. And it was pretty outstanding. They had discovered that at the time there was supposed to be a limit as to how many clips you could multi-group together. And so it was supposed to be 10 or 20. What they had discovered is that was unlimited. And so the process
just explain what multi-group is in case people don't know.
There you go. So when you are like Brandon and I are sitting here today, and I am recording at my home in Los Angeles, he is recording in his home, in his office in Miami. And so, and by the way, this is long before the pandemic. We have figured out the balance between how to make a portion of your home your office a long time ago. So, but in the day, you went to facilities. And so one of the things that need to happen. Let's, for example, we're shooting an interview, but more to the subject, in this case, a music video. You'll have multiple takes of the artist performing, close-ups, wide, side angle. So you have all these angles. And in the end, what people were doing, or at least what I was doing earlier on, was I discovered, well, how do I look at all of the takes at the same time so that I can just simply pick from the best performance of each take as I'm cutting together the performance? And what I used to do is layer it. So on V1, which is where the video first layer was, you can go take those layers all the way up. And oftentimes I would go up 12 layers or so and sync and layer all of the sync takes on top of the audio, which was the main audio, the song, on top. And then I would just turn layers on or off accordingly. It was quite messy and quite taxing on the computer, very difficult. But what ended up happening was, in my time in LA at this particular post facility with this particular owner that would send some of his assistant editors into a deep dive into what the software could do, they discovered that you can multi-group significantly more clips than the manual said you could. And in that, we ended up setting up what I called the Cat Brown, which was my name at the time, system of organizing a project prior. And that was inclusive of multi-group sub-clipping all the clips into individual bins, giving them their own separate categories and names so you know where to find the media: sync, group clips, B-roll, intro, outro, in the house, in the car, all these scenes for the B-roll. But that multi-group clip changed the game, where editors were taking 3, 4, 5 days to push out a first draft. By the time we streamlined what this process was, and I will tell you that the streamlining of this process really came together with Brandon more than any other assistant editor at the time that I was working with across the country, because he had his own set of organizational tools of how he create a project, and my Virgo mind matched with his clear understanding of how projects should be set up. And then it was off to the races. By the time Brandon and I had connected, I was delivering projects in about 6 hours, something that normally took other editors in the game 3 to 4 days. 6 hours, good enough to go to TV. So let's get back to how Brandon and I crossed paths. So here I am, out of LA. I'm editing out of New York City, LA, and at the back and forth, I happened to be in New York for 9/11. I was on there out in New York for a job, staying at the Soho House. At least I was supposed to stay at the Soho, not the Soho House, the Soho Grand. There was no Soho House in those days. The Soho Grand, and it was sold out. And I was like, oh man, I want to stay at the. There was another one, something attached to the Grand, that was more in the heart of downtown in the financial district. I can't remember exactly what it's called now. Anyways, that being said, they weren't available either. So I ended up staying all the way up at the Millennium in Times Square, which I never stay in Times Square. But it was ironic because that was the morning I was there. And that was the morning that I got a call from my rep, and she called me in the hotel phone because my cell was off, I would assume. And she's like, you got to turn on the TV. And I'm like, hell yeah. It's like 7, 6, whatever in the morning. Like, why are you calling me? Like, a long session last night. I'm just trying to sleep in. She's like, turn on the TV. And I was like, okay. I turned on the TV. And at that time, the second plane had just hit the second tower at the World Trade Center. And I was like, what the hell am I looking at? Fast forward, I drove the last available rental out of Manhattan back to where I was staying at the time in Atlanta. And as many of us remember, the U.S., the U.S. was in a state of chaos. It was quite a horrible and tragic event that had taken place in New York City. And I had decided, you know what? I just moved to Atlanta from L.A. I've been there about just almost 2 years. I was just about to move and get a place in Manhattan because I was tired of staying in hotels and eating hotel food. And I was like, if this world is coming to an end, I'm going to live in Miami first. That's all she wrote. And I jumped in my truck, I brought back the rental, literally walked in the house, dropped my bags, jumped in my truck, and drove straight to Miami. A friend of mine at the time, former undisputed heavyweight champion Lennox Lewis, which will come up in this story later when Brandon and I talk about our wonderful journeys to the house of Mr. Muhammad Ali. But I drove down to Miami, and Lennox said, I got a friend of mine. He's pretty good in real estate. He'll help you find a place. I found a place on the Venetian Causeway, right in the heart of downtown at the Doubletree Grand. And gave the guy my money and said, I'll be back in a few weeks. I drove back to Atlanta, packed up all my stuff, shipped half of it to New York, the other half to Miami, and literally drove back to Miami, back to New York to move into my place and start and do a job. And in the middle of that job, finally planes were allowed to fly again at this point. And I flew to Miami, met my truck and my furniture, put it in the apartment, flew back to New York, finished the job, and then come back to Miami finally to relax and realize, I think I've pretty much had it with trying to catch taxis in New York City. So I held on to New York and Miami. I just moved into my new apartment there, moved into Miami, and I held on to New York and Miami for maybe about a year. But now I'm in Miami, and I'm like, I need to find a place to edit here because, beyond our reality in New York, I was going to fly to New York for every job. I wanted to do work at home now here in Miami, and I found a place called Village. And a gentleman that Brandon and I both know, which we'll talk about later as well, made an introduction. He said, you got to go see my guy. He runs this facility called Village, and he's a beast, and he'll take care of whatever you need to do. He's got you. And Brandon and I met, and all my memories are of this guy in this crazy machine room with 6 million different plugs of how the different bays were all connected. It was all through this room. And Brandon was in there like, Scott, 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 Scott. It was like watching, like, what's that movie with Tom Cruise with the Minority Report? But like, but manual, like plugging in and out coaxial cables and this, that, and the third. I was like, what the hell's going on? And I'm watching him like, and he's like, yeah, man, it's good to meet you, brother. And this, man, listen, this is easy. We just do this, set you up, get you running. I was like, all right, cool, man. And I told him what my little parameters were. A project came in. I told him what my little parameters were, and he took that and just took it to a whole other level. I walked in the door, and I was like, the project was set up so astutely. It was like sleepwalking for me. I just had to turn on my creator hat and press the button and get busy. I didn't have to spend hours resetting up the project like I would with many other assistants that I've had to work with. Brandon had his own set of systems match with my set of systems. I will say to this day, it's probably the reason I became the fastest and most efficient non-linear film editor in the music industry at that time. His assistance in helping me to create a system to succeed is everything. So, Brandon, this is how I see our first meeting of each other. What's your take? Have I gotten the history a bit wrong? What's your take?
No, that's about right. How far back should I start with? I'm gonna give an abridged version of mine, but mine goes all the way back to 1995, and it goes back to I was 15 years old, and I was in a video production class in high school. It was the only thing that I really fell in love with. And we toured a facility. And this was in Hawaii at the time. That's where I was born and raised. So we toured this facility. It was the only real commercial production facility that existed on the island. They had all these machine rooms, Avids, the ABVV systems that we talked about earlier. And I begged them for an internship. And after about 3-4 months of begging them, they said, great, go ahead, go for it. But the only way you're going to get an internship is during your summer break. You got to come here 9 to 5, 5 days a week. They're basically trying to like scare me away. They're trying to scare me away. And I said, great, I'll see you Monday morning at 9 a.m. My mom would drop me off every day. And I came in after about maybe a month or so. I was sort of just sitting next to an editor while he was doing his projects every day. And one lunch, the editor goes off in the middle of editing a commercial, and the owner of the company walks in and says, "You learning anything?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm learning stuff." He goes, "Great. They'll be back in an hour. Cut me something." So he went and he duplicated the timeline, and I said, great. So I remembered, here's how you import music. So I popped some music in. I did some cuts to music, and then I put some titles, because I remember the guy making titles. And it was a commercial where a woman was running through like in slow motion on a beach. And I just put, why is this woman, like one word after the other, and then a little pause, and just said running. That's what I cut. I don't know why I did that. And then we ended, and apparently the client saw it, because I didn't know that you had to also, clear the timeline so that when you opened it, you'd know that it wasn't the old one that was there that the editor thought. So after that, the boss took me seriously. And he said, if you really want to learn how to do this, I'm going to take you away from the creative stuff. You're going to get out of the editing room. I'm going to put you in the machine room. So they put me in the machine room. I copied VHS tapes. Yeah, that's right. VHS tapes. Not DVDs. Wow. They didn't exist. They didn't exist yet. Well, at least not to me. So I would copy VHS tapes. I would run the patch base for the online suite, because back in those days, the Avids were brand new. They didn't have the quality to finish a product, but they had the ability to edit the product with much more flexibility than a tape-to-tape machine did. So they would conform the edits, meaning taking the edit decision list, which is a series of this cut from here to here, this cut from here to here, and they would reconfirm it through tape. So I would be the technical backup for that system. Cut to graduating 1998. The last thing I remember from that internship was seeing a Arri 435 film camera shooting a commercial, and I was freaking mesmerized by this thing. It was the coolest thing ever. I was used to like these little video cameras they had in high school, and this thing was massive. And the DP,
I'm a big fan, by the way, just so you know, like the photo that I think represents me, I think I'm a filmmaker. Let me show people, is that sitting on that camera looking through the eyepiece, right?
Oh.
And someone took a picture of me, right, on set with the I think I was shooting a Keisha Shante video I was directing, but it's the most ridiculous shot ever because I have on sunglasses and I'm looking through the I'm looking for the viewfinder with the sunglasses and my hand is on the switch, about to switch it so I can turn the angle of the camera. Yeah, and so when you speak about that camera, I remember how much that meant for sure.
No, that camera was a beast. And the guy just says, learn film. Don't go to communications. Don't go to video. Learn film. I had no idea what film was. Mm-hmm. And it ended up in Miami. Tropically, it was the similar situation. So I was comfortable. I made my way through film school, made a lot of friends. I worked 24 hours a day. I'd go to class, and when I wasn't on class, I'd be working for free for whomever. And one of those gentlemen that I worked for, who was the first person I ever cut anything for, was a person named Judd Allison, who we refer to. Judd was a producer for.
Big shout out to Judd.
Judd's the man. He still is in Miami, man. He's awesome, and he produced commercials, music videos. He also owned several, and still owns several. Like studios, like shooting studios, still and video studios. So I cut a motorcycle video for him because he was really into bikes at the time, and I was I think I was like 19, and they needed to cut on a tape to tape system, and I was like the only person they could find that still remembered how to cut on one of those. So I cut on that, and then years later, I got a job at a place called Village Films. And this is pretty, I'll keep this one quick. So I was, my last year of college, I was at a fashion show because it was an art school that had a fashion department. And I wore a really bad tuxedo that my cousin had like basically like it was supposed to be thrown away from a tuxedo rental that he worked at in Hawaii. And on one of my trips he gave it to me because it fit me, and so I wore that proudly. And my friend goes, "Hey, somebody's cutting a music video." And I said, "Really?" They goes, "Yeah, but they need an editor tonight." And I was like, "Oh, I'm at this party and I'm thinking, shoot, like, okay, cool, fine." I just left, got into a car, left, showed up at the edit facility in a tuxedo, and I cut the music video. And 2 years later, I'm working at that facility. By the way, the owner of that facility, I still work with him, and he tells everybody that story whenever I walk into the room.
Tuxedo Brad.
Tuxedo Brad goes, the best dressed editor ever. So I'm working for the facility, and then I get the call from Judd. And Judd was like, "Hey, I have this friend of mine. He's a big music video editor. He needs a place in Miami to work." And for I got to put into context what it meant to have an editing system back then. This was what 2001, end of 2001 or 2002. Mm-hmm. I think it was like 2002ish.
Yeah.
2002ish. So these systems cost a minimum of 50 to 75,000. The one that we had in our system was probably about 125, and that's just for the system. Then you had all the other stuff, the soundproofed room, the speakers, everything was just expensive.
The 12 gig hard drives that cost $12,000. 12 gigs, people. Listen to me. 12 gigabytes. This was a big deal. You had to get about 5 of them and daisy train them together to make a project. And there are
Yep.
about $3,000, 2,500 to $3,000 a piece each drive. Just give you context, people sitting there with your phone editing stuff, how lucky you are today. But anyways, as we were saying,
No, so it was a big deal to find a facility
yeah,
because coming from New York and LA, Miami didn't have a lot of choices for
yeah,
facilities that were set up in the way that you needed to get set up, and
yeah.
that was it. I remember that video. Wait, wasn't it some green screen? Or that was later. It was like some crazy green screen video you did later.
Bro, we did so many
I
at,
don't
at
know.
that point. It's hard to remember. But to that point, there's a story to be told. I think one of the special things that came from our efficiency in terms of working together was the friendship that we had grown. Here I was, this kid from Toronto with Jamaican parents and quarter Chinese, and sitting in the facility with my brother from Hawaii and trying to figure this thing out. Trying to deliver for clients on a high level, and I think we built an incredible friendship. I'm wondering, do you remember? Because me and my big mouth, I'm always trying to give everybody advice. I don't know where this idea came from. I think because my mom was such a caretaker of people, she was the one people called when they needed some thoughts. And I figured, if you're just there for people, it's all that life is really about, is support. So I'm wondering, do you recall? Because I think I remember the conversation, one of our most significant conversations about transition in this creative industry. Um, do you recall whenever I opened my big mouth and ever tried to give you non production life advice, when that idea ever came out of my mouth in your direction?
Yeah, I think I had left Village. I started working for another smaller company at the time. Um, I think the very first time that happened was when you had shoot okay, here's what I remember. I remember I'd gone to I was like my third company ever, and I was having a rough time. I was not really feeling appreciated.
Hmm.
Although I know I was, it was that creative person in me wanting to feel more creative than technical.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have a voice, and I felt like I was the back end of every conversation. I was in the back room while all the creators were having the conversation in the front. I really wanted to break in and get into that room. And you basically just told me that I can do it, and I just had to make the decision to do it, and that I didn't need to have all these people around me to be successful.
Yeah.
And it took years for that to sink in.
Yeah. I think what I had seen in you which is prevalent that we see in your career today. We talk about your show on A&E and the film that you had in the Toronto Film Festival, and all these incredible accomplishments that you have made and what your dreams are going forward. But in that time, I saw a level of diligence. I mean, by that point in time, I had worked in facilities in LA, Toronto, in New York, and I think some of the best facilities out there with some of the largest staff, like from huge production houses to very unique niche post-production houses like BOR, Beyond Our Reality. Shout out to all the guys from those days. But yeah, it was very clear that when I looked at all the different people I've had the pleasure of working with, that I think your tuxedo story says it all. When it comes to the job, Brandon is your most dependable, most reliable resource. And I say that to this day. There are people in the world that are really excited. They're gun ho, they're dedicated, but they may not have the talent and the natural ability to function in a space. And there are people that are really, really talented, but God knows their talent made life to some degree easy for them, so they're lazy. It is very, very rare that you meet a left brain, right brain person, that their desire for the project and to do great work is in alignment with their actual ability to deliver. You have always been that guy. So early on, when I saw what I thought was my first experiences with like mental health for all of us, it was like, here we are, we're doing the job, next job, next job, next job. But in the gap, what's happening in our lives? Are we, while these checks are coming in, but are we fulfilled? Right. And this concept, and even with me deciding to take this role as an editor, I had control in that moment, and a number of people in the industry were well aware of what my contribution to the project was. But where you were in that back room with that knowledge and ability, connecting those cables and understanding all the software and exactly how the mechanics of this process works, without you, none of this can happen. So to see you, in my mind, with all of this knowledge, knowing that you really don't need anyone to create. You really have it in yourself to do it. And then wondering, well, what there now is the limitation? It just crossed my mind like, listen, man, your piece is going to come from creating. You've got a huge story to tell. And unlike everyone else coming into the game, you are built for this. You have gone through, you have the pedigree, you have the ability. And to me, it remains. There are a few people in my life that I've had the pleasure to encourage to see their best selves. Basically, as the podcast subtext is, spark the light within, right? You were one of those people. And to this day, I think remain I'm the most proud of, not just because of your accomplishments as a content creator, as a director, as a filmmaker, but because of your ability to push through self-imposed limitations that have come from external circumstances where people did not value you at the level that you deserve to be valued. You have found your footing. You have found your way. And I am most impressed by that, because it has been a reminder to me to continue to stay on the path and continue to fight the good fight and go after things that other people might think are impossible for me, and drive myself in that way. It has been a great pleasure to know you, my brother, all of this time, all of these years. I just want to say that. I know we're only in the middle of this thing, but
thank
I
you.
want to clarify that, my bro, for sure.
Well, it's funny because now I look back and everything's so clear once you sort of look back. And the owner of the company, of the commercial company in Hawaii, his name was Dennis. And that thing you told me, you want to learn how to do this, you're going to get out of this seat and go into this seat, and learn how this works. Not just the end result. You're going to learn how this works. And I think now, almost 25, 20, like 23, 24 years later. Oh gosh, more than that. That was 95. Okay, we're not going to date myself now. So now looking at back, over 2 decades later, it taught you empathy.
Yeah.
To what the job is. And when I'm on set now directing my crew, or just working with people in general, I understand what they're going through. I understand their needs. I understand what it takes for the team to operate. And I appreciate that. And you can apply the same mentality to being on set. If you understand, let's just say, what a PA does, what a grip does, what any of the departments do, you don't actually have to be a master at the craft, but you have to understand what their needs are, and then you understand how to be more efficient in every single aspect. And then creatively, what you taught me, in all that setup process, that we were talking about earlier, setting up the music, is that when you do the work ahead of time, and also when you just have a fundamental understanding of the mechanics of it, the technical part of the job dissolves into the background, and you can just focus on the creativity. Everything in life is a lesson. Even those people that put me in the back room, it's a lesson, right? They weren't doing it maliciously. They were doing it because I didn't speak up. I didn't let it be known that, hey, I want to do this. I want to try to do this. Not only want to try, I can do this.
Yeah.
And and just sort of understanding that we do outgrow relationships and we outgrow circumstances. And that was not just one set of people that put me in that place. It was multiple people, because they relied on me to do XYZ, right? So that they could do this. They could do the job that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it's making that decision and getting the courage is more than anything else to say, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I remember this, actually. Now it's so funny now that everything's kind of sort of coming back to me. This was 2010 ish, 2010 ish. We had gotten an opportunity, a friend of mine that was working at the company to leave our company and create an app company. It was like iPads had just come out like 6 months before. We had wanted to do like this music-based app, and we'd gone through like different softwares and figured out how to do it ourselves. And we had a small investment that would have lasted us 6 months.
Right.
And I had $500 in my bank account at the time. I had just bought a house. So all the money went into buying the house.
Yep.
And I had basically like 2 weeks to make the decision. I think I did call you about that. Should I do it? Should I won't do it? I will never go back. It's just the hardest part is making that initial leap.
Yeah.
And being afraid of what's going to happen on the other side. And then you look back 10 years later and you're like, why was I so afraid of that? It's nothing.
It's I think you have brought up a very good point that I think those listening should hear, those that are driven. When you do something very, very well, as you should, when you dedicate yourself to whatever the project is or the job that you're doing, if you do it very, very well, it has a catch-22. The win is people recognize, wow, this guy's diligent, or this young lady's diligent. They are really focused on the job and they are doing a great job. And then if you have aspirations, the catch-22 is people attach you to that role. Here you are trying to grow. Here you are trying to expand in the construct of your being. This role is I won't call it a stepping stone, because I think you, like I, when you're in it, you're all the way dedicated to whatever that role was. You weren't doing it just to get somewhere else, which is why you became so great in your technical understanding. Whether you just got it, whether you just really enjoyed it, you really diligently worked towards being the best you could be in that space. And then you grew out of it. When you grow out of it, you have to be you got to do more than your career well-being. You have to do your self well-being, because people that have now worked with you, which should be the natural opportunity for progression because they've seen you at your best, those people should be pushing you in this direction that you want to go. But
that's
not what's going to happen, right? You all are watching and listening who've ever really done well in a certain part of your career and wanted to move on, know this. Everyone just sees you as that. And so you become lost in the sauce, because now people are dependent on you for their greatness. And to see you move out of that supporting role to attach yourself to your greatness, you suffer a few things. Some people innocently stand in your way. Other people deliberately stand in your way. And in the entire time, here you are in this industry, especially if you've moved into entrepreneurship, where do you put your foot down? Where do you now say, hey, as I've had the scenario of having to say to clients, hey, I'm not editing music videos anymore. I'm directing them. You've worked with me throughout the years. You've seen what I'm capable of. You know that if I direct a project and you hate the edit, that I could simply fix it in the edit. You're aware of my skills. So give me the opportunity to do better work for you. You think that sounds logical, but it doesn't. And this is the catch 22 of being great at your craft. So you have to ask yourself, well, I'd like to ask you, Brandon, how have you navigated this prospect of having the desire to be great at your craft and deliver on a high level for your clients and your colleagues, and yet measurement of your dream is being minimized because of the lack of opportunity. And it's not from laziness, but because you've worked so hard and become so great at something that folks don't naturally want to open the floodgates to move you into this other space. How have you navigated that incredible dance that creatives who are trying to grow seem to be suffering from at every turn?
Reinvention, reinventing myself. Like from the age of, from that time when I told you when I started working at Village all the way up until my 30s, I had mainly been in post. I had shot a few things, but I couldn't feel comfortable calling myself a DP, let alone a director of a project. We had done things for A&E, History Channel, VH1. I had over, I don't know, 75, 100 full hour long documentaries under my belt at that point as lead editor. Countless other miscellaneous projects. I was working 7 days a week. It didn't, nothing mattered. And when I started a new business, and I partnered with a few friends of mine that I'd met along the way. One of them was a college roommate, and we had started a company, and we kicked butt for like 2 years, just doing like 4 or 5 shows over that course. Shows take 3 to 6 months to do, so we're overlapping shows, and it was a great period. And then we went dry. And during that period of going dry, the company broke up, and I'd become more vocal about disagreeing with them. And in their defense, I may have been a little hot-headed. I may have spoken back a little bit more. I didn't know how to deal with the emotion and the pent up anger at not being put at that table, not always being in that back room. It just caused a rift in the company, and they told me they're going to buy me out at the bottommost time, the bottommost value of the company, which was terrible. Once again, that when I first entered into leaving a job and starting to be an entrepreneur, I had $500 in my pocket and 6 months of basic bill pay. And now at the time when I was about to lose my company or not be a part of it anymore, my lease in my apartment was was ending in like 2 months, and the amount of money that we had negotiated was going to last me a few months, if that. I had no equipment to do my job, so I'd either have to rent everything or figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was left in this moment of, what do I do? And I put, the females in my life have been the strongest and most inspirational people ever in my life. My work ethic comes from my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And in this moment, Indira, my current fiance, the last fiance, no. She's amazing. I met her 4 months prior, and she knew my situation, and she said, "Come live with me." And I said, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah, come live with me, and you've got 2 weeks to mourn, and then you're back to work."
I love it. I love it.
and then you had another conversation with me at the time, and I think what stood out to me in that conversation, I don't even know if you remember it. Maybe you just said it off the top of your head, that if you're going to reinvent yourself, if you have to start from zero in the image that you want. And I said, I'm going to be a director. I'm going to direct the projects. I'm going to be a director. And I'm also going to DP, because at the time I loved shooting stuff, and
Yeah.
I hated the edit room because I had done it for for so long. I haven't touched a keyboard since. I mean, I have all this in the background for display, but this is like my little command center where I'm on Zoom calls with the people that actually do edit the projects. And now 8 years removed from actually editing, I kind of like diving back in from time to time. But it was going back to the very first speech given by the director of my film school, and he said to the entire class, "What does it take to be a director?" And people raise their hand. They're like, "Oh, creative vision," and they started giving all these all these very, very intelligent answers. And he just goes, "A business card."
Bang, bang.
And everybody looked at each other like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "I just got to tell you, I'm a director, and now I'm a director." And he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Now you have to you have to actually like come through once you get the job. But that initial sell of yourself as a director is about you deciding that's what you are.
Yeah.
And then when you get to set and it's time to show up, you just have to show up.
Yeah.
And some of my best work is done when I'm nervous as hell. It's 3:00 in the morning and I'm still prepping for tomorrow, even though I'm already prepped. I can't help it. I'm just prepping for tomorrow, and I'm so nervous. And that nervousness is sort of like myself telling me you're doing something right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You made a great point. I think what your teacher was saying is, what is your identity? Who are you? And that you make that distinction, and the rest will come. And I think that's a very powerful and poignant point that makes more than enough sense. You have to decide for yourself. It's kind of like the podcast. You have been telling me for the longest time, you should do this, and I kept trying to figure out, well, what's my identity in all of that? What is this great? As you know, the whole reinvention. Boy, I tell you, you think Puff changed his name a couple of times, man. I came in, I was a dancer known as Cougar as a kid. I became a rapper still as Cougar, and then I jumped into poetry shows and became Black Cat. And then I came to the States to start editing music videos and showed up as Cat Brown. And then when I started to direct, I was like, well, no one's going to accept Cat Brown directing. So here comes Bobby O'Neill. And then Bobby O'Neill's directing. And then people are like, but where's Cat? And it's really this identity and standing firm in your decision that I'm doing this now. I mean, I gave up some very powerful relationships to be in the space and say, hey, I'm directing now. I gave up jobs. I gave up the opportunities to stay in that space and continue to be an editor. But I had to. You have to decide for yourself, how are you going to move forward? And the industry changes, technology changes. Sadly, we dealt with these change of technology that's happening now in our world with AI, but not to go too deep into that. We had changes in our technology regarding Napster and music becoming free. And then suddenly it changed the way people were dealing with music. And so now here you are, you've dedicated your whole life and your career to working so hard in this space, and you're really diligent, and you've built up your skill set. You've got, a list of clients that anyone would be impressed to see. And then the entire industry turns itself on its head. The entire thing goes upside down. It took a while for it to trickle down into post-production, in those days. But man, when it did, it did. And as it stood, the industry had a massive recession, as did the country. And so I make that point for the folks listening, because as Brandon was describing his transitions in terms of what he was doing with his company and being bought out and all the rest, all this other chaos that was a portion of how we were all generating revenue when we were in post-production, working particularly in music video, which was, I think, still one of the most incredible spaces for creativity in film with no holds barred. I thought we did things in music video that really set things in motion. But the point being, while Brandon is, as he's telling you this story, all this other stuff is going on in the background. The industry is in utter turmoil. And as a creative, you're saying to yourself, okay, how do I manage this? Where is the flip? And I think it brings me to this point of a very old adage of, like, doing what you love for a living. I think it's easy to say that you better, because the life and the concept of your career in the creative industries can be very challenging. But I think to dive deeper into that, because that's our goal, to do more than just say what has been said and aim to do more, I think there's a greater, deeper seated scenario I'd love to get your perspective on, Brandon, which is what happens when you feel you're losing the love for this thing. When you're a grown man and you're now out of your 20s and out of your 30s and moving into your 40s, and you're saying, well, wait a minute,
Wow.
where is this going? And
fear is the devil, man. Fear is the worst thing, and it never leaves you. No matter how many things you've done, you question. It's imposter syndrome. It's like you work so hard to be in this in this chair or in this position, and then you're like, well, I'm not the right guy for this. I'm not the right person for this. and you are, but you don't think that way. But as far as losing the passion, I think once it is that anxiety that you get before doing something that's really special for you. And when I enter a situation and I'm totally calm about it, I'm like, have I done this for too long? Am I not challenging myself, or is it just not for me anymore? And I got that way at some point with editing, where I was so sick of it.
Yeah.
You look at spending 10 years sort of figuring out the art of documentary work in different forms, and you're taking hundreds and hundreds of hours at times of material, and bringing it down to half an hour, if it's a feature, longer, 50 minutes or longer. And it's a very, very difficult task, but at some point that task became like just another day.
Yeah.
It became it and then when you start not wanting to show up is a problem.
Yeah.
I'm usually the first one to come in and the last one to leave. And when now I'm, just not caring about doing it anymore is when I started questioning it. And then the fear sets in, because you want to change something, but you're too afraid of going into a different situation, because the situation very well, even though you don't want to be there.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people, you know what, at the bottom line is, you don't have to be a workaholic. You don't have to think, breathe, film 24 hours a day. And understanding that off time is as important as the time on. Having a hobby, having an outlet to just like turn it off.
Yeah.
Is important. Also, like, I think having friends that do work in the industry, and not in the industry, but especially when your friends do work in the industry, and you can spend an entire afternoon with each other and not mention it, is a challenge.
Yes.
And
Because your work, we talked about that identity concept earlier, your work becomes synonymous with who you are. And when work is suffering and work is struggling, you can take that moment to chip away at your own ego. It's just work, though. It's but when you do passionate work and it's synonymous with who you are, your losses on the job become synonymous with what you think your
oh,
losses are in your life. Yeah.
is it just work? Because when you start doing projects that get publicly consumed, and somebody rips one into the project you just worked on, it hurts.
Yeah. Yeah. You're an artist and you're sensitive about your stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The question I have now is, firstly, I wanted to read something. I feel inspired now at this point to read something from Daily Inspiration. As you know, and as the folks that have seen any of the previews or artist proofs to the podcast know, this is a book I wrote in the last year of my mother's life, matched with 70 parables, matched with 70 photos I took all over the world. This is like the only copy of this design of the book. There's a whole other version that's available for folks on Amazon, but Daily Inspiration, Your Guide to Hope in Times of Hopelessness. This is the original Genesis, the book of Daily Inspiration. I'm going to flip through and try to find one verse, read it to you, and then ask you your thoughts on its impact. And then I would like to move into a special part of the podcast that will be happening anytime that I have guests. Well, I'll ask you what your favorite project is, let you think about that in the background, and give us a case study as to how that project came to light and how a person who is interested in what you do in that filmmaking space, I see your expertise across the board in all genres of filmmaking, but say specifically in documentary, or should we say docudrama television. Whatever the project is, we'd love to hear your thoughts on how someone trying to enter the business could find their way to a project like that. We'll get to that next. But before we go there, let's just find, actually, you know what? Call out a page number anywhere between 7 to 70.
7 to 70, 44.
Good number. Good number. Let's see. That would be easier if I numbered the pages in this version of the book.
just
But we're gonna flip 44 in. That feels like 44. Okay, here we go. So ironically, here we go. Shot in Dominican Republic. It says, there will be a time when tribulations will pass and you will stand triumphantly atop a pedestal. Do not ask if, but know that when it comes, it will be the right and intended time for you. What is required here, then, is an actionable patience by which you faithfully continue to work at your dreams, assured that their becoming a reality is an inevitability. Assess your dreams carefully to be sure that they are founded in a way of being rather than a possession. A new house will deliver temporary joy, but contentment is forever. Stand faithfully. So, how does that land on you today, my friend? Tell me your thoughts.
That's appropriate, man.
Yeah,
that's appropriate. We're always changing and evolving, and you have to sort of embrace it. But you got to appreciate what you have too, and where you're at. It's interesting because now I try to be that person that encourages others to outgrow me, even though I'm deadly afraid of, I got to start from scratch, with whomever's in your orbit. But it's hearing that, the person that was your assistant editor 15 years ago is now managing like a major post house, or for example, my current project, which I'm going to make that my favorite project because it is a passion project of mine. when I've known him since he was 10 years old. And at some point, I think when he was, 18, 19, he decided to go into film. And I took him under my wing maybe about 6 years ago. And he kept saying, I'm not ready. When I asked him, hey, do you want to edit a show that I just, that just sort of, I've become the director of out of nowhere. and I would love you to edit it. And he said, I'm not ready. And I said, yeah, you're ready. You're ready. And it's passing on the gifts that were given to you, the motivations that were given to you, and making sure that someone else always receives what you have, the best of what you have received. And I don't know, that it may not be literally what those words have said, but that's where my mind started wandering while you were saying. It's just that appreciation for everything everyone's has sacrificed or said, and just making sure that others feel that, and never being that person that holds someone back. But it's trickier than it's trickier in practice than it is in theory.
Yeah, man, it's the magic of this thing called life. Yeah, man, it's magic.
Yeah,
it's magic.
Yeah.
So on that note, let's do a spin, ladies and gentlemen. Those who are desperately excited or interested in this, one of these many entryways into the film industry, we're going to now switch over to a portion that we call curating life through the language of design. In this segment, we will be speaking to Brandon specifically about one of his biggest projects, and we will do a quick case study on the project, what it took to make the project come to light, so that you can have an example from an entry level. Hey, I want to do this. How do I get in? Here's an example. So Brandon, take it away.
Oh man. Okay. So when I initially got into this business, I didn't know what I wanted out of it. Just wanted to do cool stuff. That's pretty much it. I learned that I didn't like commercial work. That just wasn't me. I liked music videos because it was cool and fun and flashy, and you could also tell stories. And obviously, everyone wants to make feature films. That gets into this business. But documentary work sort of called me, and I sort of always ended up back in that genre. And I also really have a passion for, socially conscious, work. I do a lot of work with non-for-profits at pennies on the dollar for what I usually do work for, just because staying in that space keeps me healthy. It makes me feel like my efforts are going towards something that is not for me, and even better when I can actually participate in a project that helps people. So my current project that I'm working on, it's titled Addiction Unplugged. It's on A&E Network. This is our second season. Our first season was in 2020. So we had a little bit of a break in between season 1 and season 2. But basically this show is about humanizing addiction. And it's about second chances. It's about showing people that there is life when, after life after addiction, life after recovery. And the path to addiction, I've never personally been addicted. I've had family members and people young when I was younger around me in that world. But it was a passion project for a gentleman named Stuart Goffman. He's the creator of the show, and he found me through a mutual friend to do the pilot for the show in late 2018, and we did it. We just sort of did this 5-minute pilot and didn't know where it was going to go, and then it gets funded and greenlit for network. And then I became the director of photography and a producer on the show. And we filmed the show. we enter post-production, and I wasn't really at that time a part of the like an integral part of the post-production. I was just commenting on things at the time, and things weren't working out for whatever reason. I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus for why they didn't work out, but they didn't work out. And I got asked to then head the project and direct the project and get it to the finish line. And, you know, I had directed projects before. I directed one-off things, but never 10 consecutive episodes back to back to back to back to back at that time. And it was a challenge. And that's when I came to the editor. And I said, "This is now you're going to share my challenge, buddy. This is going to be your time to shine." And it felt right. You know, when you're on set and you're talking to people and they're sharing their story, and you look at your challenges and you're like, God, my challenges are nothing compared to your challenges. And you appreciate everything you have, and you feel that when you're making this piece, when you're making this show, that you have to do right by their story, and you have to tell it correctly. And I feel that empathy is what my path in life has taught me and is ingrained in me, that I'm not doing this just because I want to check, or because, you know, this is how I fill my week or my day. I'm doing this because I have a greater purpose to tell a story. And in this particular case, it's a documentary. It can be a film, a music video. It can even be a commercial. There are really cool commercials now that are little short form stories. And you're a storyteller at the end of the day. The medium that you're telling the story, or the way that it's presented, can be anything. But you and I are both storytellers. So we finished season 1, and it got really, really good reviews from the network. They really liked it. And now we're entering season 2. And now I'm from the start executive producer and director of the series. And now I have a second challenge in my life. Is I have to now interview hundreds and hundreds of people. And I have done, like I said, I've done interviews here and there. I have seen producers I've worked with do interviews. I know the mechanics of it, but it's the it's the confidence of it that was the challenge. And it's still tough. But I'm growing into it, and this is now where I'm at in my career, is learning, is hey, you know, you wanted to be in the chair, you wanted to be at the table, and now that you are, you have to realize what all those people before you were dealing with.
Yeah.
And the good and the bad.
Yeah.
When something goes wrong, fingers pointed at you. When something goes right, fingers pointed at not you, fingers pointed at the team.
Yeah.
And it's challenging. So we're in the middle of it. Actually, we're in the middle of post. We're 80% shot. We have some amazing people in the show. We've interviewed Mike Malak. We have Brandon Novak, formerly from Viva La Vam, and they're all sharing their stories. And we also have someone. His name is Matt. He was affected when his father was in the first tower that fell in 9/11, and that one is its own challenge. You know, it is dealing with pain in a way that someone can digest it and learn from it, and you're also not exploiting it.
Yeah.
And it's really tricky. But I love it.
Do you find working? I'm very pleased to hear you describe the project for this part of curating life in the language of design. A project that's a purpose project, purposeful, purpose engaging, purpose driving project. Do you feel you walk away from projects like this stronger? I remember, I say it because, when I shot Freetown Reborn in Sierra Leone, for which I'm quite sure throughout that process I called you a couple of times for some help with some things. I backed that up with the brain injured children in Barbados and the HIV positive youth in the Dominican Republic for the other piece. I found myself in a state where I wanted to ensure that the final story was one of hope. And so I ingested a lot of suffering to come to terms with how to tell this story of hope. And I found that suffering weighed heavily on my chest. When the doors closed and the cameras off and the computers shut down, those stories stayed with me and had great impact. I don't know, I won't call it harmful, but I would say that it was difficult to see people suffering in the world in such a way. How you feel that has now into your second season and that responsibility to tell these stories and knowing you the way I do, I'm going to assume that your goal, obviously, as well, is to try to uplift and inspire. How do you see these things? How do you see these great levels of suffering and difficulty, and what kind of impact has it had on you in your own personal life?
It's hard not to take it home. Indira, my girlfriend, she sees it. She sees it when I come home, and she knows when when my cup is full. and I you have to read so much about everyone, and you have to talk about it, and you have to do your own process that you almost sort of go through their experience with them, to try to understand it. And a part of that means that you take the emotions and then you start attaching your life circumstances, your past, into their past, and you find connections. And it's, as a documentarian, I'm not putting my own personal stuff into the documentary, but as a human being, it's opening up wounds and things that I maybe haven't dealt with, or that I didn't see it from that perspective. And so in a way of growing, yeah, it helps you grow, but you also have to turn it off. And not in a way that you're numb to it, and that like I said, this is a 9 to 5. Hey, yeah, okay, so tell me about the reasons for your trauma. That's not what it's about. What it's about is being present in the moment, being present in the project at all times, but then having that moment of silence to turn it off, so that it doesn't become your trauma as well.
Yeah.
And it can very easily go that road if you don't know how to have off time. And I remember early when I would edit, I didn't know how to turn it off.
Yeah.
And I had to do a project for Discovery ID. It was about the Son of Sam, and we did two actually back to back, Son of Sam and DC Snipers. And I had to look through autopsies. I had to hear 911 phone calls, and I was doing this for 7 months, just every day, just listening to stuff. Finally, I had to take the writings of from the Son of Sam, and I had to do scratch voiceovers.
Wow.
No one was around to do them, so I just read them in the studio by myself at like 2 a.m, and I couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
So it was like I would go home and not sleep because I'd have nightmares about the material that I was working with.
Yeah.
And then I would enter in the next day, and I would just look exhausted because I couldn't walk away.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say, like, your off time is as important as your on time. Be as connected as you can to the material. You need to, if you don't feel like it's connected to you in some way, if you don't feel an attachment to it, you're not going to put your heart into it. But with that said, you need to walk away so it doesn't become your reality. So it doesn't become you don't get confused with what your role is in this process.
Yeah.
And you don't take on the material as your own. But it's very difficult, especially when you start speaking with the subjects and you feel, you just sort of start feeling a tighter connection to their story. And then you also have to understand there's a network involved, and the network is going to ask you when we need a bigger turning point here, and the tease on this act is not strong enough. Can you bump it up? And I'm like, I'm not going to bump up someone's, reality to be this like reality show, fictional, like cliffhanger. There's a fine line between all that in the work. Oh my gosh, I went on a tangent. Well, the second half was like how to get into this stuff.
I'll take it from there. So I will say this to the listener, because Brandon is giving you guys real insight, which is not just this airy fairy, clap your hands. This is great. I'm doing my dream. It's awesome. That in the doing of purposeful work, that there is some suffering there, that there is some difficulty that you have to navigate. But I would say, and I think Brandon would agree to some degree, when it is purposeful work, you impact people's lives in positive ways. And that is the replenishment. That is the balance for taking on difficult stories and telling them that when your output does the story justice and honors the people within the context, in the documentary space, when you are honoring people's truths, there's a growth and there's an opportunity for others to be to navigate this thing called life in a more positive way, in a more transformative way. People can see themselves in the struggles of others and see themselves in their triumph and their overcoming. So we, when I say we, I mean me, the world. Thank you, Brandon, for being that guy to take that on your shoulder and make the sacrifice to tell these stories. I certainly struggled through it in my career, in that period of my career when I was shooting philanthropic documentaries with, everything from War Child Canada to the Pink House for HIV positive children in Dominican Republic. And these things really weigh a weight on you. But ladies and gentlemen, let us be clear. There is a great reward for being able to be of service to our community, our human community. And with that said, we're going to move into the third and final segment of this incredible dialogue with my good friend here, Brandon Dumlao. And this portion is called All Else is Trivial. And All Else is Trivial is... we're going to look at a quick conversation about wellness. I'll ask Brandon a few questions about how he treats his prospect of wellness. Personal development is important here. Health and wellness is important here. So we'd like to speak on a wonderful subject. So some may feel that this golden gentleman to my left, who might be camera left, most my left. Anyways, that gentleman is someone asked me before, oh man, I saw that Buddha in your recording. I said, well, that's Confucius. And so it's an interesting thing speaking about him, because I keep him here because many who know or ever heard the name Confucius, there's almost no one you could speak to that does not know who Confucius is. They may not know every one of his stories or his quotes, but most know who he is. But what few know is that Confucius, with his grand philosophies on trying to make the world a better place and bring human beings together, it took 2,500 years after his death for the impact of his work to land on the world in the way that we now know it. In my humble opinion, when I think about it in real terms, here he was, lived his whole life to an old man, with all this awareness and enlightenment that he tried to share. And died without the majority of people taking on his philosophies. In my opinion, I imagine being him in that moment thinking, well, I've gave my life to this thing and died thinking I did not create the change in the world that I have been fighting so hard for. And that thought breaks my heart. But I keep him nearby because what lets me know is that our doing purposeful work in the world may not always pay off immediately, and it may not even pay off in our lifetime. But make your mark, ladies and gentlemen. Do what you can to have impact positively in the world. You will be shocked to find that years long after you have left this place called Earth, that some of the things you may have said or recorded, a podcast, a poem you wrote, a documentary film that you made, or a TV show that you executive produced and directed, as Brandon is doing, may be something someone years from now sees and it saves their life, uplifts them, causes them to go after their dreams and their goals. That's what this whole thing is about. So on that note, I'm going to bring up something very personal that I've talked to Brandon a multitude of times on. It'll be the spiritual side of how we close this wonderful episode out. As you know, Brandon, I am very much a practicing Buddhist. I mean, practicing. Would love to be and intend to be and always work to be more diligent in my practice of wellness overall. But please tell the people a little bit about your growing up and your history with the practice, and how much of it has any impact on your life today. What else do you do to, as you say, take a step back, take a breather, have a self-care moment? Tell me more about that.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I never learned much about Buddhism traditionally. Like you probably actually know more than I do. But I grew up in a Buddhist family,
Yeah.
and possibly why I turned it off.
Yeah.
So I grew up with my father's side is Japanese, Filipino. My mother's side is Puerto Rican, Portuguese, and we're all a hodgepodge of stuff. And my mother's side is Catholic, and my father's side was Buddhist, and they couldn't decide what I was going to be. And I went to a Buddhist preschool, and grew up, and my grandmother would have services or prayers in the house. We had a shrine growing up. My only memories from 5 or 6 years old was seeing that shrine and seeing the little rice offering being put in, and the beads and and all those things. I never really understood it, and I shied away from all of that growing up, because no one really decided what was my identity, which I thought was probably the best thing ever, because I don't really identify with a singular thing. I kind of try to learn about everything.
Yeah.
But when it comes to Buddhism, I think what I take out of this is sort of finding that balance in your life, and finding that silence and that still in your mind. Meditation is extremely important, and whether you meditate from a spiritual purpose, or you meditate just to be in silence, it's going to have an effect on you.
Yeah.
You just have to quiet your brain. And it's the same way as if we want to better our cardiovascular system, we go running or work out or eat better or whatever we do. How do you work your brain out? How do you give your brain time to be on off rest? And meditation's huge. And I remember you and I went to Sadhguru.
Yes.
Yes, that was
the master, Sadhguru. Oh man, that was a trip. I forgot that we went. That was
okay. Yeah. Here's the funniest part about when we were talking about this. Not to bring it back to work, but see, once again,
can't help
filmmakers cannot spend 2 minutes without going back to film. Our stories have so many tangents, and I was like, I know this podcast is the right thing to do when I was trying to tell you a reference, on a moment in time. And I'm like, yeah, that time we were with Muhammad Ali at his house and we flew on the private jet and like we thought we were gonna crash. Yeah, that's the time I was talking about. And you're like, oh yeah. I'm like, what the hell? So but as far as like meditation and balance is that I find that I have to tell myself to turn off.
Yeah.
And I turn on. I have office hours for my brain. And I've gotten to the point where I legit won't even pick up my phone unless I know there's an active active project that I have to look out for fires.
Yeah.
And it's off. There was a period I remember after Sadhguru we had to do the 40 days twice a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
You're a beast, bro. I don't know how you got to the end. I tried.
I got through it.
I think I was at about 34 days in. I was like, I don't know.
It was tough because they required you to not eat, or drink any coffee or tea or anything like that before, and they had this set of rules that if you ate, you had to wait 8 hours. If you drank tea, you had to wait 4 hours, or coffee. No alcohol, which is perfectly fine because I don't like to drink anyway.
Yeah.
But what that taught me was that actually, like, going back, the one thing that Sadhguru said that was amazing was because remember they gave us that homework before going to the event, and you had to pass the homework, and it was like this little website. You had to listen to stuff and answer questions. It was like we're back in like school again. And he was like, the reason why I made you do that is so you can learn that it is possible to put 20 minutes a day aside for yourself.
Boom.
And I was like, what?
Simple.
So simple. And it's just one of those things. And also just cultivating the relationships that you have.
Yeah.
And and that's been a challenge and it's when whomever you're with, your significant other, is like, no. Tonight, you're not doing any of that other stuff.
Yeah.
What are we going to do? I don't care what we do, but we're doing something.
Yeah.
And it's finding time to be with those other things in your life that aren't the things you should do. This applies more than just creative work. It's just for any work, anything in life. But the difficulty that people in the creative industry have is not making their identity 100% defined by the thing that they call their creativity.
Yeah.
And it's a constant challenge, especially and more so for the bad than the good.
Yeah.
Because when things are going great, you'll have an easy time shutting it off.
Yeah.
When things are going bad, you'll enter a crazy depression.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, we every time I get off a large project, it's like clockwork. Every time we finish, we turn it in, and it airs, and then I sit down and I have the lowest of the low, and I feel like I've done nothing in my life, and I feel that what am I good for? Tomorrow there's nothing on my agenda, and it's like this routine that I go through, and finally she picked up on it. She's like, yeah, you always do that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what?
So it's funny because there's a philosophy that I had discovered a long time ago where I believe art entertains and artists suffer. And people are like, what are you talking about? I mean, it's the entire subtext of For Art's Sake, the film that I wrote. And it's this concept that we are not, I believe, artists are not so fulfilled by the final product. For us, it is the journey of creation. It is this process that lights up our serotonin levels, the front area of our brain is on fire. All of our fears are just drowned out. The amygdala is shrinking. We are here. We are present. We are, as they call it, in the flow. It's like watching a great basketball player when they're just in the zone and nothing can stop them. I don't think you can interview a single athlete that's been in the zone and said that they were struggling. It was hard. There was a moment you just fall into this place. And I believe for us as creatives is when we are creating that process of having to deliver a final product, a tangible thing that at some point in time was simply an idea in someone's mind. And now here it is in physical manifestation for the world to enjoy. And you're out there and you're like, this is the moment. Wow. Take a good look, people. Next time you get an opportunity to go to like a film screening or like a party for a project that's been completed, take a good look at the people who did it, the people who actually led the project. You will see many people will look like they are engaging this gratitude of being uplifted and put upon this pedestal and everyone. But look at them in the off times in between when they're talking to people. You will find them almost in an introverted state, just quietly in their own heads, just looking off into nowhere. There is a level of just unfulfillment. It's crazy. It's hard to understand, especially now, because literally last night before we were going to get on, I was watching a few things on YouTube. I decided to watch some more uplifting and mental challenging processes rather than just watch a show and be entertained. I wanted to test my brain a little bit before we sat down to talk. And it was this really great thing with this guy named Huberman. You may have heard of him. He's got a huge podcast. He's on neuroscience and he works at Stanford, but he's got his own podcast where he wants to share, the science of how the mind works for people for free. And it was very interesting. He had mentioned this idea of not having a reward at the end of a task, but finding your drive and motivation for the task in the task, that in the doing of the task is the reward. Because when you, for example, you take children who could draw and they love drawing, and then you put them in a room and you say, okay, at the end of their drawings that they were doing anyways because they love it, you start giving them a reward. And then about a month later, you take the reward away. You find the children that automatically were into drawing without any reward attached stop drawing because they attached the effort that they were making while drawing to the reward they got at the end. And then the reward is what they desired and the effort became a task. We are already ahead. Isn't it amazing how the human mind can find some way to find distress even when you're doing things right? So as creatives, we are doing it right. Our desire to find purpose and be moved in the doing is correct. It's 100% correct. Society has placed all these additional stressors on us as far as what's the outcome, or in these days, how many people have watched it, how many people have streamed it, how many people have looked at it, and that becomes the way of valuation. And it's true when you're delivering for a client, being able to create an output that serves that client and creates revenue for them is the goal. But for your mental health and your well-being, maintaining the fact that having great joy in the work, not just the outcome, but in the work, this is where growth comes. This is where peace comes. This is where joy comes. This is where, whether it's paying you $1 or $1,000,000, this is what makes it all worth it. It is in the doing and therefore manifestation of the very essence of your being to be able to create in this magical world that we live in. And with that said, my brother, yeah, any last words you would like to share with these great people who have taken the time to listen to us all this time?
Oh man. Well, first off, those rap parties, the look on their face is a cross between giving birth to a baby and a funeral. It's
Yes.
at the same time. But last words, man. This is a field that will test every bit of you, and but it's completely worth it. And earlier, I think you said that you better make sure you love it.
Yeah.
Because there will be a moment where if that love's not there, then what else is there?
Yeah.
I can't even tell you. And I think every person that's been in this business will have a version of their story, a version where everything was against you. It did, or at least that's your perception, right? And you had to just run through it. Sleepless nights, nights turning into days, moments where you dramatically underbid a project and you're losing money on the project, and you have to make a decision that you're not doing this because of the dollars and cents. You're doing this because this is the thing that you want to do.
Yeah.
That it's bettering your life in some other way that no one else in this world can understand.
Yeah.
And everyone will say you're obsessed or you're this, you're that, and it's maybe so, but that's what we chose. We chose a career that forces us to put our heart and our soul and everything out there for others to judge. And you have to learn how to be okay with that, good or bad. And it is 100% worth it. 100% worth it. And I know that you have to be willing to lose things. You have to be willing to close doors in a polite way. Never burn bridges, but you have to leave things behind. And you'll never know when past decisions or past relationships help you in the future. Even my former business partners, if they ever hear this, we're on good terms. I respect everything that they did, even though that if in the moment we didn't agree or we had words, they taught me something. They taught me very big life lessons. And to those who maybe screwed me over, like legitimately screwed me over, meaning didn't pay you, or
Right.
or walked out of the project. That part, they taught you another lesson. They taught you how to protect yourself, how to find those things earlier. And who knows, maybe they screwed you over, but they left you finishing a project that was one of the most amazing projects of your life.
Yeah.
So take every opportunity as if it's the first and last one. You're never too old in this business to learn, and if you stop learning, you will stop growing, and if you stop growing, what is the point?
Yeah.
So always learn, always be willing to reinvent, but also appreciate everything you have, every person around you, every relationship that you have. You need to appreciate it, and most importantly, appreciate yourself. And the way you do that is by finding time for yourself. Drop the mic.
I would like to say, Brandon, my dear friend, you're one of the good ones, my brother. You are greatly appreciated. And if there was anyone that I would have been honored to be on a flight that had it gone down, they would have said Lennox Lewis and other people.
Others and crew. Lennox Lewis and crew went down.
On the way back from Ali's, if there was any, that is a whole other story. I'll throw up a picture of us sitting together with Lennox and Ali, plug in right there, right now, to show how far Brandon and I go and the wonderful things we've been able to see together in this process. But if there is anyone I would like to share a subtext title of a news report had that plane gone down. My God, that was a scary day. Where it was Lennox Lewis and the crew. It would have been my pleasure to know that I was crew with you, my friend. You are a gem in this world, and you are forever a dear one in my heart. I love you dearly, my brother, and thank you so much for the encouragement to do this and to create this podcast. And thank you for being on it. It means more to me than you could ever know. You are the confirmation for me that we are moving in the right direction. So we keep learning, folks. We keep driving forward. I want to thank you for joining us here on Robert Young's Bright, Famed, Shining, the podcast. And don't forget to log on to the links that you'll see below. I'll be sure to be putting up a case study with more details about Brandon and the projects he's got going on. And obviously, we'll make sure that you know when his show goes live and you all tune in to watch it on A&E. Brandon, again, thank you for your time, my brother. Much love and respect always.
Thank you.